there's someone who lied to the Europeans in Europe that there was a king named as Prester John. Legend has it that there was a legendary king called Prester John. They believed that he lived somewhere in Eastern Africa, in the north of Eastern Africa. And if you look at the geographical location of Africa at the moment, when you say the north of Eastern Africa is most probably Ethiopia. So the Portuguese, when they came to East Africa, they believed they would have met the legendary king Prester John. They wanted to form an alliance with Prester John to counter-attack Muslims. They wanted to get help from this king so that they could fight back the Muslims. The Portuguese were so eager to revenge on Muslims. And when they arrived on the Eastern African coast, they found that Arabs and Omanis Persians, they had dominated East Africa completely. So a stage was set forth for a serious war. Over the 200 years of the Portuguese rule of the Eastern African coast, from Kismayo to Sofala in Mozambique, it was never an easy ride for them. They fought so many wars, so many battles with Arabs, with the Egyptians, with the Persians. In fact, they conquered Hormuz, a place in Oman, where they built a fort to counterattack the Omani Arabs from there. Well, said and done. After so many wars, eventually all the towns in Eastern Africa fell to the Portuguese rule. The Portuguese, on the other hand, they were ruthless and brutal and very corrupt. The captains who were in charge of each town, from Sofala, Pemba, Kilwa, Zanzibar, Mombasa, Malindi, and Lamu, they were all corrupt. So the Portuguese government was getting minimal benefit from the trade and the gold they were acquiring in the Eastern African coast. It was in the year 1593. In the year 1593, the Portuguese government decided to construct Fort Jesus in Mombasa because they had finally taken over Mombasa. Mombasa, in fact, was the hardest town to conquer because of the Mazrui family. They were very inact. The Mazrui family had held Mombasa as their personal property for so long with the help of the Omanis. And following the defeat of the Mombasa town, and it came under the reign of the Portuguese decided to construct Fort Jesus and to make their Mombasa their formal headquarters in Eastern Africa. Though they had an headquarters in Goa in India, which was in fact their main headquarters. The problem with the Portuguese, they didn't know how to live with other people. They never befriended the Africans, or in a way tried to make them friendly to them. So their relationship with the African indigenous people who they found there was not good. The Africa resented so much on Portuguese harsh and brutal rule. So over the years, in 1593, when the fort was constructed, the Portuguese dwelt on that fort for only 100 years. Though they had been in East Africa for 100 years, they constructed the fort and they stayed on it for 100 years. So there came a time there was this Omani Sultan called Ibn Saif. This fella decided to go to war with the Portuguese. When they reached Mombasa, there was a fleet of so many thousands of men from the Omani under Ibn Saif. They conquered Mombasa, took over the fort. The fort had a population of about 2,500 people, men, women, and children. under these 2,500 people, there were, of course, African servants, a few Arab friends, Portuguese nationals, men, women, and their wives and children, plus the soldiers. So when they locked the gate of Fort Jesus, the Omanis couldn't penetrate. So for 32 months, it's about 2 years, the fort was inaccessible. And due to the lack of supply, they couldn't get food and water. It was such a menace. But finally, the Portuguese decided to open the Fort Jesus. When the Omanis got hold of Fort Jesus and walked in, they only found 12 people alive out of the 2,500 people that had taken refuge in that fort. Most of them had died because of diseases. The Portuguese colony ended up after 200 years in 1698 when the fort was captured. Although they recaptured the fort again in 1723 by the help of the local Swahilis, but again the British came and took it over in the later years. The Portuguese had an opportunity to rule the world, but they had greed. You can imagine a country with over 50 colonies worldwide. They had a vast empire that they had made for themselves. But the problem is that Portugal was underpopulated. You can't rule such vast lands without people to work for you. So I think due to, and then it was in up to 1640. For 60 years, I think it was in 1590 to 1640. The Spaniards had annexed Portugal and made them part of Spain. So for 60 years, they called that marriage the Iberian marriage. It was for 60 years Portugal were under the Spaniard rules. But they had not ceased to be a sovereign state. In fact, they had not ceased. But you see, this diverted the attention of the Portuguese towards the east coast of Africa. And for so long, other European nations like Netherlands, Britain, and France, and the Spaniards had created an interest, and they also wanted a share of this globe. The Portuguese had taken a lot. In fact, that's a perfect example of biting a lot that you cannot chew. The Portuguese had bitten something that they can't chew. So when these other states decided to go on the episode of colonization, time had come that Portugal really had to restrain some of a stronghold that she had gained for the last 200 years, since the era of Vasco da Gama and the likes of Bartolomeo Diaz, during the era of Prince Henry the Navigator, the son to the king. Portuguese lost most of their empire, and when Mombasa went to the Omanis, it was a change from one alien to the other, until finally it came to the Mazrui family. Later they were taken off by Said and Said Bagash, and that's another story I'll give you one day, about this merchant called Said. I'll give you that story one day. And then the Portuguese had colonized Brazil, Macau, which they gave it to China in 1999. There's a Portuguese Timor. They had almost 50 nations they had put under their colonization sphere. In Africa, we had Mozambique, Angola, Cape Verde, Sao Tome and Principe, and Guinea-Bissau. Up to date, these countries in Africa speak Portuguese as their foreign language. Portuguese really had achieved a lot in terms of navigation, maritime. They were the best. And the next episode, I'll be giving you a story about this fella called Said. Watch out for me tomorrow, and I have a lot of stories I'll tell you. I love history. I'm not a professional historian, but I really love black history. So until next time, see you guys.